Table for our consideration. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to be consulting my written notes here. Today, I present to you House Bill 265, the Defend the Guard Act, a bill that is as straightforward as it is necessary. This bill ensures that Wyoming's National Guard cannot be deployed into active combat zones overseas unless Congress has issued a formal declaration of war. This is not a radical idea. It is the law of the land, enshrined in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of our U.S. Constitution. And yet for decades, we have ignored this fundamental safeguard, allowing our guardsmen, our neighbors, our friends, our sons and daughters to be sent into wars without a clear mission, without accountability, and without a lawful declaration from Congress. And in doing so, we have permitted an injustice where those who swore an oath to defend their home are instead sent to die in foreign lands for foreign interests in conflicts that Congress have never formally approved. This is not just a modern problem. It is a danger that our founders foresaw. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, and our fourth president made it clear. The Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrate, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. It has accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war to the legislature. Madison and the other framers understood that war is too great a burden to be left to the whims of a single individual, or even an administration. It is a decision that must be made collectively, transparently, and with the will of the people through their elected representatives. When we allow the executive branch to deploy troops into war without a congressional declaration, we are not only violating the Constitution, we are undermining the very system of checks and balances designed to protect our republic. So let me make it clear what House Bill 265 does not do. It does not restrict the National Guard's ability to deploy overseas. It does not prevent training exercises with our allies. It does not stop humanitarian missions or disaster relief effort abroad. It does not hinder the Guard's ability to be ready for any mission that serves the American people. The bill only ensures that when our guardsmen are sent into active combat zones, it is done under the proper constitutional process, a formal declaration of war from Congress. That is all. The simple fact is that the National Guard exists to defend America. That is its purpose. And when our guardsmen are not at home, when they are fighting a war on the other side of the world, it means that they are not here for us in our moments of crisis. Let us not speak in abstractions. The price of these unconstitutional deployments is paid in blood. Wyoming families have mourned the loss of servicemen who have answered the call to serve, only to be deployed to wars that Congress never declared. They left from towns like Cheyenne, Rock Springs, and Bondurant, believing that they were fighting for the security of our nation, but instead found themselves drawn into conflicts that had no clear mission, no defined enemy, and no exit strategy. And just last year, 3 members of the Georgia National Guard lost their lives in Jordan, not on the battlefield defending America, but stationed near the Syrian border in a base protecting a monarchy. These service members fulfilling obligations to an international order that repeatedly puts American lives at risk for foreign interests. This is not what the National Guard was created for. The Wyoming National Guard was never meant to be a global police force. The Guard exists to protect Wyoming, to respond to natural disasters, defend our communities, and safeguard our state's sovereignty. Yet time and again, our guardsmen are deployed to fight and die in wars that are not ours, under leaders who will never know their names, for causes that do not serve the people of Wyoming. And every time that happens, it means that they are not here when we need them. When a flood hits our state, shouldn't the Guard be here? When the wildfires rage across the West, shouldn't the Guard be here? When our own communities are in crisis, shouldn't the Guard be here? Instead, they are being sent into wars Congress never had the courage to declare. For over 20 years, the War on Terror was waged under the authorization of use of military force, a document so broad that it has allowed presidents of both parties to send troops into dozens of countries, including Syria, Yemen, Somalia, all without a congressional vote. This legislative cowardice has enabled a system where war never ends, and the burden falls on young men and women who swore to serve their country, not foreign regimes. As Madison warned, executives are prone to war, and when we allow them to bypass the legislative check on war powers, we create a system where endless conflict becomes the default state of American foreign policy. House Bill 265 is not anti-military. It is not isolationist. It is pro-Constitution and pro-service member. It ensures that if Wyoming's National Guard is sent into war, it will be for a lawful and just cause, one that has been debated, voted on, and declared by the people's elected representatives. Passing this bill sends a clear message. Wyoming will no longer allow its guardsmen to be used as pawns in wars that Congress refuses to declare. If war is necessary, let Congress have the courage to declare it. If the cause is just, let our representatives put their names behind it. If a sacrifice must be made, let it be made with the full weight of constitutional authority. But until then, let Wyoming stand firm. Let us lead the way and defend our Guard so that they may truly defend us. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the sponsor, Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Singh, for bringing this bill. I too have long been concerned about the lack of actual declared war since the Korean War. We've not ever declared a war, and it's a problem. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I also have had concerns. My husband's in the military, not now, but about the use of the National Guards in ways that far extend beyond what their original purpose was. And so I appreciate you bringing the bill, but I did want to clarify a few things. Currently, what is happening with the Guard when it is taken into these conflict situations, how does that occur right now?
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So right now, this would fall under whether or not it would be a presidential order. So the president has the authority to bring the National Guard wherever he declares, really.
So I think
Representative
that's,
Lawley.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that is correct. And so this doesn't really prevent him from doing that. It really, we're really making this statement that's not really how we would like to see our Guard used and sending that message. Would that be accurate?
Representative Singh.
That would be accurate. It would be a demand that the president respects the authority established in the Constitution, that it is Congress who makes the declaration of war and not the president.
Follow up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Further questions for the sponsor? Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about, now this may be down the line a little bit, but is it true that when these activities are requested, that the governor has the ultimate say on whether or not the National Guard, the Wyoming National Guard goes?
Representative Singh.
Mr. Chairman, ultimately that authority is with the president of the United States.
Representative Erickson.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So the governor doesn't have any check and balance in that once requested?
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, no, he does not.
Thank you.
Further question? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Singh, I just want to confirm that you did say that this still would enable, the Guard can still go to respond quickly to international crises and emergencies, and it doesn't interfere with their training at all with this bill, correct?
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bratton, no, this bill would not interfere with any sort of operation with natural disaster responses or training exercises with our allies abroad. This really has to do strictly with combat situations.
Thank you.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, I had to walk out for a second. I don't know if anyone asked this already, but there is a significant fiscal note. Could you speak to that?
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this fiscal note, I question the reality of this fiscal note, simply because it is dependent on a response from the Secretary of Defense. And to my knowledge, the current Secretary of Defense, who was most recently sworn in, is actually in full support of these types of bills. This particular legislation he's publicly commented that he's in favor of this. And so if this fiscal note is specifically in response to what we do in the state of Wyoming, that somehow we would be made an example to the rest of the nation, I don't believe that our current Secretary of Defense is going to do that to us, considering that he's publicly stated that he supports this bill.
Follow up? Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. All right, do we have comment by any state agencies? Oh, Representative Pendergraft. Sorry, I forgot to ask for members of the legislature. Thank you, Representative. If you could please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief, and I wasn't really sure what your sequence was, but
Got it right.
members of this committee, I am in full support of the concept behind what is being tried to accomplish here, but I have serious constitutional questions about who the National Guard is today and how they're associated with national forces and being integrated into the United States Army, and what the Wyoming Constitution calls for, in that every citizen between 17 and 70 is there. And my basic comment is that either we should follow the Wyoming Constitution or we should amend it. But it is my belief that the National Guard, as we have perhaps unconstitutionally allowed it to be reformed, you're going to run into some serious problems with this. That's my position.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other legislators? All right, state agencies. Thank you. We have about 5 minutes for comments.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter, and I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. I believe this is the first time I've been in front of the Education Committee, so I don't know many of you, and you certainly don't know me. So, but very quickly, I'll tell you I enlisted in the National Guard here in Cheyenne. And from there, I moved to, got my commission at the University of Wyoming in political science, and also got my commission there as a field artillery officer at that time. Served in basically all the levels of the National Guard here in Wyoming until I was appointed as the Adjutant General by Governor Gordon about 6 years ago. My wife's a teacher here in Cheyenne. We have 2 boys, one of which is serving in the National Guard currently. Today, I appear before you to give you my professional military advice on the negative impact I think that Defend the Guard will provide the National Guard, particularly here in Wyoming. This is not the first time that Defend the Guard has appeared before this legislature. It's come on off and on for the last 10 years or so. If you look out across the nation, about 30 states, a little over 30 states have entertained the same legislation, and to date, not a single state has passed it. That's because of the significant negative consequences to the National Guard as we know it today. The National Guard in its current form has existed this way for the past 100 years or so. What it is the National Guard is the primary combat reserve for the Army and the Air Force. About 1/3 of the Army's forces exist in the National Guard. A little over half of its combat forces, particularly in fires, reside in the National Guard. About 21% of the Air Force's capability resides in the National Guard. We are a very competent force over these last 23 years deploying and serving at the behest of the President in this nation. And that brings us to the very crux of this. If the President cannot access the National Guard, then I believe our forces and those in the National Guard are in jeopardy. About 95% of our budget is federal. Day to day, we work under the command and control of the governor. It's called Title 32. That's the status we usually exist in when we go to training and do annual training. That's in Title 32, federal pay, federal equipment, but under the control of the governor. When we are federalized, then we fall under the President of the United States. I believe Wyoming is particularly susceptible to this. As I've told you, this has been attempted across the nation, but if it were to happen in Wyoming, I think there are grave consequences. First off, we're small. We're not a Texas or a California. I think we'd serve as a perfect example to the rest of the United States if they were to say, we cannot use the National Guard to go do the nation's bidding, then I believe they would be forced to take our equipment and personnel from here. That means all of our C-130 aircraft, our HIMARS launchers, our UH-60 Blackhawks that we use for search and rescue, the C-130 that we use to do MAFs, all that they would be forced because they can't access them, they can't have them. And because we're small and lack a little political clout, I think that's a very serious danger because frankly, the Department of Defense cannot afford to not be able to access us. I have found no particular public comment from Secretary Hegseth or the President endorsing Defend the Guard. I could be wrong, but in my quick look around, I have not seen it. Certainly the actions that they're currently taking would not comport with support of this particular bill. I'm very concerned, and particularly with Wyoming right now. We are in the process of competing for a new C-130 aircraft. It's called the C-130J. There are 4 other states that are competing with it. I am convinced that if Wyoming were to pass this, they would not modernize this aircraft. And we need this to do our mission. So they just couldn't afford to let it come to Wyoming because that modern aircraft is not something they could access. So I'm very concerned that as we compete for this, a decision is going to be made in March that we will fall short in this endeavor. Overall, we are critical to the defense of this nation. You think about the large, that's only one component of the National Guard here, but we make up a significant piece of it. Lastly, I think I'll close with telling you this, and I'll stand for questions. None of this is accidental. Imagine a world where our adversaries face a United States that's constrained. The president cannot access his National Guard to do the primary deterrence missions of which we are most effective. Imagine if the president, the Secretary of Defense, has no options in that area and is completely cut off to do that. I think that makes it easier on our adversaries and certainly tougher on us. Congress has been very careful to lay out the mobilization rules. It's quiet. I've got a handout if you're interested. There are some instances, sir, when the governor can consent in those things. There are some when he cannot in those mobilization operations. But Congress has been very careful to lay out a very specific set of rules of which the reserve component can be accessed and mobilized. Time, number, all of those things that I think are important to all of us. So I think what we see here is very detrimental to the state of Wyoming. We could not do our defend, our shield part of our mission for the state without the equipment. And I really am concerned that they would take that away from us and which we would not have the ability to respond. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time. I appreciate, I know you have many things to do, but I certainly stand for any questions that you have and anything I can do to help along those lines.
Thank you. Are there any questions for General Porter? Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. I always enjoy your presentations on the floor when you come, and always very enjoyable. So as I read this bill, it really doesn't prevent the president from doing anything, doesn't prevent the governor from doing anything. It seems to be more of a statement of intention through the legislature of the people of Wyoming about concerns about how things have happened in the past, I guess I would say, and I think genuine concerns to my view. So where do you see in here something that constrained you? And I'm not saying it's not there, it's just I may not be seeing it. So could you help me with that?
Mr.
General
Chairman,
Porter.
Representative Lawley, I think the concern comes with the prohibition that you cannot utilize the National Guard in combat situations without a declaration of war. I think that's a clear restriction. Now, whether that would survive a legal opinion, the Supreme Court has weighed in marginally on some of this. I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't be able to say, but I'm definitely concerned about the intention that it sends. And again, the response that I believe the executive branch would have to take to say, listen, we can't afford for every state in the nation to say you can't have access to your National Guard to do those missions. As I said, we've got about 40,000 National Guardsmen deployed right now across the world. I've seen no discussion whatsoever from the President or the Secretary of Defense about curtailing, changing, or moving it. The fact is, we absolutely have to do it in order to continue our deterrence missions.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
All right, we will move on to public comment. We have time to take 15 minutes, both opposed and in support of the legislation. If you are opposed, please speak now. How many people are speaking in opposition to the bill? All right, and there's none online, so thank you. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee, my name is Exie Brown. I am a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the United States Air Force. I served both on active duty and on active duty with the Wyoming Air National Guard for nearly 22 years. And I will tell you, like the great Representative Pendergraft said, I like the concept and the idea behind, because the National Guard is a reserve force for the states. However, there are a lot of consequences that come with this. I personally have dealt with budgeting, acquisition of assets, personnel, manpower during that time, both locally and at the national level. And I understand how that all works. And I will tell you, not having access, allowing the president or the DOD to have access to our fighting force and to our assets will be very detrimental to our mission here, not only, with the Wyoming Air Guard and the Wyoming Army National Guard. In U.S. Code 32, Section 325, it does give the governor the power to tell the president, I cannot allow you to have assets to go into combat. U.S. Code also limits the federal government from obtaining more than 40% of the Guard's assets to deploy. And what is our mission? What is our role? Our role is to protect the state. We have to be the shield for the state, but it's also to be the war fighter, to fight and win our nation's wars. We take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Wyoming against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true allegiance to the same, and to obey the orders of the President of the United States and the governor of the state of Wyoming. Those of us who enlist and take that oath take it very seriously. And there's no qualifiers in that oath of enlistment that say, well, we do solemnly swear to do this, but if only we know what we sign up for. And, to the general's point, this could really hurt what we do. Our mission in the Wyoming Air Guard is to provide combat airlift. We have to be able to airlift and airdrop supplies, cargo, ammunition to that 19-year-old soldier on the ground that's fighting the enemy. If we don't have that capability, and we don't allow the president and the federal government to have that capability, there's not going to be a need for it. And I'll take one step further. The Air Guard's trying to get the J models. I'll take it a step further. They could come back and say, and this is obviously very worst case scenario, they could even come back and say, well, we can't utilize your assets for what we need them for and what a C-130 is for. I guess we can take that mission away and change it to a cyber unit. That will affect our capabilities here in the state of Wyoming. That will affect the airmen and the soldiers out there. So as much as I like the concept, I really cannot agree because I think it will be very detrimental to the mission success of our Wyoming Army and Air National Guard. And I'll stand by for any questions this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you repeat that statute that gives the governor the authority to say no to the president?
Mr. Brown?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bratton. So the word request comes in, it's in 502F2A, and it's very significant. The president or the Secretary of Defense may ask the governor to deploy National Guard troops, but the governor is under no obligation to that request. And this is also supported by Title 32 U.S. Code, Section 328, which makes it clear that the governor is the party empowered to order the National Guard to duty, and under the prong of 502F. And that was actually enacted by a governor. Governor used that code back in 2020 when the federal government wanted to deploy 15 of their troops, and they said, no, we can't not afford to send those 15 soldiers to deploy. So the governor does have the power to say no. And the federal government, like I said before, they can only, with the governor's consent, deploy only up to 40% of the fighting force. So we have to maintain 60% of our fighting force in our state.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Which governor said no?
Mr. Brown.
It did not state specifically in this article. So, sorry.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. My name is Amber Leba. I am the COO of the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. And I'll keep this pretty brief because everything that I was going to talk to you guys about has been already stated. We'll just echo General Porter's points that he has made. We do believe this bill has some grave unintended consequences to the Wyoming Military Department and the ability that they would be able to carry out their deterrence mission, and that would roll down to everybody in our state. It would affect our economy and everything like that. So we do stand in opposition of this bill. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further testimony in opposition? All right. Anyone speaking in favor? Representative Singh, you have not been voted off the island if you would like to come back. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Lindholm. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself and my family. I'm a veteran from May of 2001 to May of 2006. The reason I bring up May is I signed up before 9/11 and things got really weird really quick while I was in. But either way, I've got a lot of experience with this piece of legislation, Mr. Chairman, and it makes me really proud to see that it's back. Once again, I was the original sponsor here in the state of Wyoming of this legislation. The reason I say that is you just heard that C-130s are at risk. We heard the same thing 6 years ago when we first ran this legislation. Now, granted, it wasn't from the general that we heard that C-130s are at risk if you do this. Who we heard it from was at the time was Representative Liz Cheney, who was our representative at the time, who took the time out of her busy schedule to call the Speaker of the House and talk about C-130s. I don't know why these C-130s are always at risk of this legislation, but just the same, I guess it's a real concern. I did want to bring that up. And then, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we heard specifically that there's been no quote from Secretary of Defense Hegseth in regards to this legislation. January 6, 2024 on Fox News, Pete Hegseth did say, and he was speaking about New Hampshire's law of Defend the Guard. He said, New Hampshire is simply pointing out that it's supposed to be Congress that declares the war. It has become an executive branch function, and as a result, unless Congress declares war, New Hampshire doesn't have to send troops for foreign wars. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I spent most of my career as a National Guardsman, deployed multiple times with the National Guard to foreign wars. We got used to the idea that the state National Guard are part of an expeditionary force, which is not traditionally the use of a National Guard. And so this is New Hampshire saying we don't trust how the federal government is going to use our troops, so we're willing to commit them when the American people, through their elected branch in Congress, commits those troops to a foreign war, then you can. I love this idea. Pete Hegseth said that. So yeah, I think that's a pretty strong endorsement. And furthermore, Mr. Chairman, where does this come from when we're looking at the Constitution and we look at where their authority is derived here? We're looking at Article 1, specifically Section 8, which would be powers of Congress. You'll note that they don't label this section of the Constitution powers of Congress that can be relegated to the executive. It just says powers of Congress. Our framers said this is the job of Congress. And under Section 8, Chapter 15 and 16, it lays out specifically that it is Congress's power to declare war. Our framers were very cautious about getting into unnecessary wars because they've just been used and abused by another country. The reason they started the Revolutionary War was multitudes of things, but this is an important point. This is powers of Congress. And as a veteran, I signed up, and I think, as a father now with multiple children, if they sign up, great, but I damn sure, Mr. Chairman, want Congress to stand on the line also, and they can declare war. And the last time they declared war and stood on the line with our members that sign up was World War II. World War II. And there's been a lot of mistakes that have been made since then. I don't think anybody looks at Iraq and Afghanistan as a roaring success, even though we spilt a lot of American blood over there. And finally, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we heard multiple times that we can't afford to do this, and this is going to be really hard to be able to keep our boots on the ground, so to speak, and be able to afford to do things, and that this will put a lot of pressure on the Department of Defense and what have you. Good, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, really, really good. There should be pressure applied. We're sitting at a time where we've got a president that has spoken out against endless wars. We've got a Secretary of Defense that has spoken out against endless wars. I think this is a really good opportunity for the state of Wyoming to take a stand and say, yeah, we're sick of this too. And so I hope that you'll support in favor of this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Lindholm. Again, I echo much of your concerns about undeclared wars and sometimes how that we have used the National Guard maybe a little beyond their intended purpose. But I'm zeroing in on this page 3, lines 7 through 18. And can you explain to me how that's enforceable?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lindholm.
I'm sorry, I don't have the bill in front of me right now. If you'll give me 2 seconds, I'll get it pulled up.
Absolutely.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. And will you repeat that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you.
Let's go to Mr. Saint, and we will come back to Mr. Lindholm. Please state your name and where you're from.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Gabe Saint. I'm from Douglas, Wyoming. I'm the current president of Turning Point USA at the University of Wyoming and a current ASUW senator and the author of the ASUW bill that is in support of Defend the Guard. But I am primarily here to speak on behalf of young people, and I think that there is a trend growing across the state of Wyoming, both with young people, both left and right, that we are opposed to these foreign conflicts. And the president's ability to call up the National Guard, which was supposed to be traditionally state militias. If you look back in U.S. military history, our founders were very much opposed to a strong executive and standing armies. The militia, the National Guard, was supposed to be for state use and state use only. And I think a big reason why President Trump got 52% of the youth vote was because he was opposed to endless wars and getting involved in these foreign conflicts. And so I'm speaking on behalf of that, and I really think that that this whole thing is federalism. Is the states created the Constitution? They wrote Article 1, Section 8. giving Congress the power to declare war. And the states need to take bold action to uphold the Constitution and hold the federal government in power. Young people would like to see our republic be independent again. And that's why we see this movement of young people being opposed to us being an international police force. That was not the purpose of the United States of America when during the founding era. The purpose of the United States of America was to be a nation that prioritized peace with all nations, not war, not policing all these peoples. I know my friends, and if you have the ASUW bill in front of you, it was National Guard members at the University of Wyoming that wrote that letter. They signed up to serve Wyoming. They did not sign up to serve Jordan or go fight Bashar al-Assad, he's gone now, or all these other things, go fight another war in Europe. They signed up to go help ranchers who are facing wildfires. They signed up to go stop floods. They signed up to go help with damage from tornadoes and that kind of thing. And defend the Guard does not prevent the President of the United States from nationalizing the National Guard anywhere in the Union under Title 10 and Title 32. But under that, I stand up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindholm, have you been able to read page 3 and explain how that's enforceable? So we've talked a little bit about the role of the president. We've talked about the role of Congress. We've talked about the role of the governor. Tell me how this provision is enforceable in the state of Wyoming as written.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lindholm.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Representative Lawley's question, super good question. It was actually partially answered in this gentleman's testimony. He specifically cited Section 30, or Title 32, pardon me, and that'd be Section 502F that lays out how a National Guard is federalized. But that also goes to prior testimony specifically citing that they may request. And that would be the impetus by which a governor may decline and be able to say, yeah, I can only send out, due to my statutes, if this was passed into law, specifically citing the declaration of war.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it
Follow up?
answered. That's
All right.
fine. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sophia Gomelski. I'm the Director of Governmental and Community Affairs for the Associated Students of the University of Wyoming. And I'm here today on behalf of the student body saying that ASUW expresses our very strong support for House Bill 265, the Defend the Guard Act. This legislation fundamentally aligns with constitutional principles, and it preserves the sovereignty of our state's National Guard. It ensures that decisions that impact Wyoming service members are made with the gravity and deliberation that they deserve. I think that this bill reflects a very fundamental tenet of our Constitution, the necessity of congressional authorization for acts of war as outlined in Article 1, Section 8. By requiring an official declaration of war from Congress before deploying the Wyoming National Guard into active combat, this reaffirms constitutional intent and protects the people of Wyoming, including our peers and loved ones that serve in the National Guard. I think that this legislation holds particular significance for our University of Wyoming community because many students and alumni are members of the Wyoming National Guard, balancing academics and family responsibilities as well as their commitment to serve. This bill ensures that their deployment into dangerous combat scenarios is authorized only under constitutionally sound and justifiable circumstances, safeguarding their well-being and honoring their sacrifices. This legislation also promotes stability and mental well-being for them by reducing the risk of unnecessary or prolonged deployments, which often have lasting effects on service members and their families. For student members of the Guard, these kinds of disruptions can significantly impact their academic success or career aspirations. This also reflects the values of civic responsibility and accountability that many of the University of Wyoming students hold dear. It reinforces the idea that critical decisions like engaging in combat must undergo proper scrutiny and deliberation. This isn't a statement about any international conflict or affairs. Instead, we believe that this measure exemplifies the transparency and integrity that's essential to our democracy. As such, we respectfully urge the Wyoming legislature to support the Defend the Guard Act. This legislation protects the rights of Wyoming National Guard members, it upholds the rule of law, and it demonstrates a commitment to Wyoming service members and future leaders. Thank you so much, and I'm here for any questions, but you might be better off directing them to my friend Gabe here, who did write the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, can we please go online to, I believe we have Mr. Rezit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is J.W. Rezit. I am the president of Young Americans for Liberty here at the University of Wyoming. So I'm here representing that organization, as well as a member of the Associated Students in the University of Wyoming, our student government here on campus. So I'm advocating here for the student body as well. I think it's a commonly held belief that when it comes to involvement in politics, the youth are generally ignorant and apathetic. But what I've seen the past 2 months in my ability to mobilize grassroots support here at the university in order to support this legislation has really sort of contradicted that idea. I have gotten an amazing amount of support from both the left and the right of the aisle from students from a number of different backgrounds and situations. We have support from Young Americans for Liberty, my own organization, from Turning Point USA, as well as from College Democrats and the student government itself. I think the reason why we have so many young people who are supporting this bill is actually pretty simple, because the sort of situation of our generation is that virtually everybody in my generation has been living through some state of war since they have been born. The undergraduate group of students here at the university currently, we're almost exclusively born in a post 9/11 world. So this is really all that we've ever known. War in the Middle East, war on terror. The war in Afghanistan started the year before I was born, and it ended my freshman year of college. I mean, this concept of war abroad is really something that's permeated our entire lives. These low intensity conflicts have really been something that's influenced our generation's understanding of the world around us, as well as the way that the U.S. interacts with other countries. Moreover, I think that it's necessary to mention that the reason that so many youth are so involved and passionate about this legislation is because of the increasingly prohibitive costs of students being able to attend colleges. Even at a relatively modest university like the University of Wyoming, where it's significantly more affordable than most other universities, it's still very burdensome for us to be able to afford to go to college, to be able to advance our education so that we can succeed hopefully in the future. And this has created a lot of financial pressure for students to join the National Guard in order to gain the education benefits which are correlated with that. And I think that ultimately this has produced a situation where we have a lot of young people who are unknowingly putting themselves in dangerous situations where they can be sent abroad into active duty combat zones in wars that were never actually approved by Congress. So ultimately what this bill is seeking to do is to prevent the governor from releasing the Wyoming National Guard into an active duty conflict zone without a formal declaration of war by Congress. As has already been said many times, this is explicitly outlined in the US Constitution in Article 1, Section 8. And despite this fact, it has been subverted in virtually every single war since World War II. The wars that many of you Congress people have lived through, the wars in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, none of these were technically wars according to the checks and balances which were outlined by the Constitution of the United States, and the ramifications of this have been quite harmful on the National Guard and our guardsmen. Since 2001, 45% of troops mobilized into the Middle East in the global war on terror were members of the National Guard system. And of these troops, 18% of the casualties in the region were incurred by these troops. Since 1980, according to some of the data I can find, over 90,000 active Guard Reserve members have passed away in service to our country. This includes both guardsmen and reservists, so it's not exclusively guardsmen.
Mr. Rezit, if you'd please wrap up, we're about out of time.
Well, my apologies. I just wanted to state that I think that ultimately Wyoming would be the first to pass this sort of legislation. It's greatly supported by the youth, and this would be a very important step in being able to move our country into a more sustainable position moving forward in foreign affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are unfortunately out of time for public testimony. If there isn't an objection from anyone on the committee, I would like to see if there's anybody who is or has been a member of the Guard here that would like to testify in favor, where there was excess time for opposed. So I assume there was nobody, but is there anybody who is in the Guard who'd like to testify in favor? All right, seeing none, thank you. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Strzok.
Second my own bill. Yeah, I second it.
Seconded by Representative Singh. Is there any amendments to the bill that anyone would like to offer? Seeing none, any discussion on the bill? Representative Lawley.
Mr. Chairman, Again, page 3, lines 7 through 18. I am not convinced that that's even enforceable. It's a statement more of intention. I don't think it's constitutional, quite frankly, of either the U.S. Constitution or state constitution. But because of that, I would maybe at least like to consider some amendments to that section. The statement the bill makes is a worthy statement, but anything that attempts to do something that's not constitutional, that creates problems for our Guard because of the way it's written, I don't like that choice, really. I wish I didn't have to have that choice because I think you're defending something that, quite frankly, will not withstand constitutional muster. And by doing so, can't even make a statement that you want to make. But that's just something to think about.
Are you offering an amendment?
I wanted to talk about it, maybe hear from the sponsor.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Lawley. If you have language that you'd like to see in the bill that would perhaps make it more legally defensible, then I'm certainly all ears. But truly, the intention of this bill is to address the problem that our practice has been to usurp the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution is being ignored, and that is the problem that this bill aims to solve.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The problem is, in my view, this bill doesn't do that. It cannot, in this fashion, in this approach, be effective except in making a statement. And I guess at least one of the things I would think about is instead of shall not on page 3, line 8, should not. I mean, let's just make it what it is. It's a statement of intent of the legislature, a statement of what we feel about these issues. But in directing it the way it is, but my view, having no real force of law, really puts the Guard in a very difficult position. And therefore the potential of losing assets and things like that. But anyway, that's my view, and it's something perhaps to consider, and maybe even more, but that would be a start.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. Listening to the testimony and reading through this, my understanding from the beginning is this is basically a statement against the misuse of people who volunteer in our armed services. But I'm hearing from our military, thank you, but no thanks, because of the potential effects that we have here. And considering the Federal Supremacy Clause of the Constitution in conjunction with the War Powers Resolution of 1973, this won't hold any legal weight. And I signed on wanting to make that statement, to stand up for young people and say that when they sign up to serve their state and their country, that they're not agreeing to be the world's police force. But at the same time, I agree with the good representative that we can make this political statement and not simultaneously put our military's readiness in jeopardy.
Representative Erickson.
And I would, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask Representative Kelly, how would you see that going forward of making the statement without having some of the consequences? Do you think that this has that ability to do it in its form?
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just striking the word shall and putting should, we're making a statement that, and then we're not demanding anything in legal action.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might further add that I would also recommend striking page 3, line 16 from the last sentence, the governor shall, and take that out as well to complete the intent, I think, of what Representative Kelly and I are kind of concerned about.
Are you moving that as an amendment?
I can do that. Mr. Chairman, I move that on page 3 at line 8, we strike the word shall and put should. And that furthermore down in page 3, line 16, beginning with the word "the," and then that last sentence, "the governor shall take all actions necessary to comply with the requirements of this section," strike that as well.
Is there a second? Moved by Representative Lawley, seconded by Representative Kelly. Discussion on this amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Williams.
for clarification, on line 16, your recommendation was strike shall and replace with should?
On line 8.
Oh, excuse me, line 16.
On line 16 is the last sentence, the whole last sentence.
Strike the whole last sentence.
And all that last sentence.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion?
I would be interested personally in hearing representative from the Guard, the general, how he would view that.
General Porter, would you like to comment on this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I do so somewhat reluctantly. The intent, I certainly appreciate. I think you're right, Representative Kelly and Representative Lawley. I'm not sure how it's enforceable as a statement of intent. It's probably good. I can appreciate that, but again, I'm not sure that it really gets us to a spot that if we have to enforce this. I don't know that it clears that up any.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Braden, one more
Thank you,
question.
Mr. Chairman. I would also just like to, has there been any blowback to the New Hampshire passing of this law?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brenner, I don't believe New Hampshire passed it. I think one piece of their Congress was interested in passing that. I have no states that have passed to defend the Guard. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding at the moment.
Arizona. I think Arizona, just the Senate passed it.
The Senate passed it, yes, ma'am.
And then I was, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Guggenmoss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the bringer of the bill, would this be better accomplished by doing a resolution rather than trying to do a bill like this?
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if the amendment passes, it would effectively be a resolution. But that's really at the discretion of this committee. It takes away the enforcement provision with the new language. Hope that answers your question.
Further discussion? Representative Erickson.
I would also be in favor of a resolution because we've talked about the unenforceable nature of this right now. And so wouldn't that make sense that we move in that direction, in my opinion?
We'll say that I don't believe we can take that action now, and there is no more time to file a bill. So I'm not sure that's an option for us, but. No, I don't think we can. We can't make it a resolution. I'm not sure. Further discussion? Representative Guggenmoss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment on this whole thing. I like the intent of this bill. I wanted to serve, but I chose not to because I saw where we were going. We were going to all these foreign places. And I was like, what does this have to do with us here? And so I opted out. Now I realize this has become the norm, us going everywhere. And it's become accepted in people's minds. But, you know, I think the ones that brought up the fact that, you know, our founding fathers never wanted us to have a standing active military. They wanted us to have a Navy to protect our borders. But as far as the active military, they didn't want us to become an imperial state that was going everywhere and doing what we're doing today. And also the fact how many of our veterans have come back wounded, maimed, and in boxes, fighting wars that constitutionally we were never justified in going to do that. So I'd like to see that norm broken, but just a comment and my feelings on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? I have a comment. I think that in saying that it isn't legally enforceable, we're pitting federal code against constitutional law. And I feel like we know which one trumps which. I think the amendment completely guts the purpose of the bill. I think it would be nice to have a statement, but it would effectively be a joint resolution, which doesn't necessarily do anything. I would like to put it forward as it is. And if it needs to be debated in a court, this is a court decision that we might want to have made. Because if this is a question of our law conflicting with what we know it says in the Constitution, perhaps this is how we ask the question.
All due respect.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's not the way it would play out about that. We are looking at something that's happening at a federal level, and a legislature who doesn't have the authority. I don't think it's going to play out like you think it is legally. So, but anyway, you're forgetting the part about the effects on the Guard, and I don't think we can totally dismiss those, just in case we roll the dice and maybe we'll have a lawsuit we might win. I just don't see that as an effective way to approach it. But I also have a second amendment when we vote on this one.
I do think it's relevant that the federal agency that would make those decisions is now headed by a person who has endorsed this particular policy. So I think some of those concerns may not be that much of a concern under the current administration. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd also just like to add on, if we're talking about which way the courts would lean on this, I did reference the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which was intended to limit how often and how much a president used the military at his own discretion. And it has failed to ever really been successfully enforced. So despite the fact that we have this law that this would conflict with, even that law, the judges have deferred to the executive authority to deploy troops. We had this in 2011 when President Obama ordered strikes in Libya. And his own party brought him to court and he won. So I don't think we'd win this just based on precedent and history.
Vice Chair Lawley.
I agree with what Representative Kelly just said, and just I don't think this bill was intended to be about that. I think it was intended to make a statement, but I have kind of a just basic issue as a legislator voting for something, a provision seeking to enforce something that I don't believe is constitutional. It's not how I roll, and I think that's an important aspect here. If we can make it the statement without trying to have an unconstitutional enforcement, I think we should make it. If we can't, then I won't be able to support the bill.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we are voting on the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no?
No.
I'm not sure. All those in favor, please raise your hand. The amendment has been adopted. Back on the bill. Is there any discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also recommend another amendment on page 3, line 7, striking the words notwithstanding any other provision of law, and then inserting, it is the desire of the Wyoming legislature that, and then the rest of the provision, the Wyoming National Guard or any member thereof should not be released.
Do we? Sorry.
I'll just speak to it for a minute. Taking it to a should, I don't feel the notwithstanding any other provision of the law is applicable. Is not applicable. To use the phrase notwithstanding any other provisions of the law is no longer applicable based on the changes we've just made.
Do we have a second? Seconded by, who's that? Representative Guggenmoss? Kelly, Representative Kelly. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're voting on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. Amendment has been adopted. Further discussion on the bill? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do like expressing the state-level opposition to this unauthorized deployments rather than actively, preventing them, which is what I think that this is doing at least now. But I also I don't think they should be able to, I like what the young people said, that they shouldn't be able to be sent off without congressional authority. It's not that there's no authority for the federal government to do this, it's without congressional authority, I think, as it was intended. And, maybe this is a start of the pushback that will encourage more young people to join the Guard. And I thank the bringer for bringing this.
Sorry, was that an amendment?
Oh, that was not an amendment, that was my statement. So now we're
All
on
right.
that part. Thanks.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we are voting on the bill. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 265, Defend the Guard Act, do pass as amended, Representative Bratton,
Aye.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Strock,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Chairman Andrew,
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you. The bill passes the committee. House Bill 148 is now on the table for our consideration. Representative Rodriguez Williams. Good afternoon, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of Education Committee. I'm Representative Rachel Rodriguez Williams from House District 50, and today I introduce to you House Bill 148 and ask for your favorable consideration. If I could explain and walk the bill.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The title of House Bill 148 is University of Wyoming Governance, and it deals specifically with our elected trustees of our land-grant university. Members of the committee, there's nothing that unifies Wyomingites like our university. Regardless of disagreements on politics, religion, or the litany of other things that divide us today, we all love our Wyoming Cowboys. Sadly, many Wyomingites, including alumni, lifelong fans, and cowboy converts, are disappointed with the direction our university has taken. Many across the state are concerned with increased politicalization of higher education that has begun to impact our land-grant university. This bill allows for residents of Wyoming from across the state to elect representation on the UW Board of Trustees. It increases representation of the people and provides an opportunity for citizens in Wyoming to have a stake in the leadership of our beloved university. This bill creates an opportunity for Wyoming to hold its land-grant university to a higher standard of representation, transparency, and accountability so that every community can begin to place confidence in its decisions. Currently, the Board of Trustees, 12 members, is appointed by the governor. This bill maintains the constitutional status quo of 12 appointed members and simply expands the board to allow for 7 elected members to have a seat too. The people of Wyoming love our university. This bill again allows for ordinary citizens to run to represent their communities and serve the university at the same time. Additionally, this bill provides accountability without upending the board's current structure. It's a perfect way to maintain structural status quo while expanding public access to the university's governing authorities. Mr. Chairman, there's about 16 pages of this bill, and I've pretty much summarized it and would stand for any questions from the committee regarding the contents of the bill.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Rodriguez-Williams? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, thank you for being here, and I just, could you kind of walk me through how we go from where we are to where the bill takes us, just so I can kind of think it through in my mind in terms of this new structure?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, thank you. So again, the purpose of the bill is to increase the members of the Board of Trustees. We have 7 districts in the state, and so what it would allow is it would place those vacancies or create vacancies for those 7 positions to expand the board, 1 per each district. Again, I mentioned earlier, we have a constitutional obligation. I'm not amending the Constitution by any means, just trying to provide more representation across the state, similar to what our community colleges already do. So, and then, of course, throughout the bill, there's amendments in Title 22 when it comes to like definitions and inserting the University of Wyoming trustee into our election code. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Further discussion, I think. Further questions? That one's gone away? Okay. No more questions, thank you. Any legislators who would like to speak to the issue? All right, 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Pendergraft, House District 24, and I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. The reason I'm a co-sponsor on this bill has to do with co-equal branches of government in effect. And what I have seen over the last 30 or 40 years of watching politics in this state and indeed across the nation is the representatives of the people taking a step back and, in my view, shirking their responsibilities and relying upon executive branch agencies to make rules, to take over. You know, we end up kind of giving them an idea, and we say, we think this is kind of the way things should go. Here's an agency, you guys work out the details, and then we go home. And in my view, what we have done is created an excessive amount of power vested strictly in the executive branch. And I think this is an example of that. We have a board of trustees, all of them serving at the will of the executive, none of them chosen by the people or by the representatives of the people. And for that reason, and probably some others, I think this is a good thing. You know, there's an expression, too many cooks spoil the broth. I don't think that's the case here. I think this is more along the lines of too few cooks haven't cooked it. We need to have a broader perspective of persons, and indeed some of them outside of the executive authority, to be able to balance this out. So I do stand in favor of this, and I ask for your favorable consideration of the same.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Pendergraft? Seeing none, thank you. Any comments by state agencies? No state agencies. We will now open public comment. We will accept 10 minutes in opposition and 10 minutes in support. If you're speaking in opposition, please come forward and fill the chairs. Sorry, Ashley, was there anyone online in opposition? I forgot
Not
to.
for this one, Mr. Chairman.
No opposition. All right, is anyone speaking in favor of this bill? Please grab a seat if there's anyone else in the room speaking in favor. Mr. Saint?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Gabe Saint, president of Turning Point USA at UW. The purpose of my student organization, Turning Point USA, is to bring conservative values to our college campuses. But because we're the only Turning Point USA chapter in Wyoming at our state's only university, our primary purpose at UW is to make sure and do whatever we can to make sure that the university reflects the virtue and character of the people of the great state of Wyoming. Over the last few years, under my administration as president of Turning Point, we have seen a lot of great work done at the university under the current university administration, especially in areas of free speech and DEI. I really think that there is a heart under the President Seidel and other university administrators to make sure that UW is reflective of our state. But I think ultimately to make sure that UW is reflective of our people, our great and virtuous people, is to give the university to the people. I support this bill because the people would get to elect our trustees, and I think that's the best way to hold government accountable, and the university is a branch of the government. And so as a student representative, or not as a student representative, but as a representative of, Wyomingites at UW, I think that this would be of great benefit to UW, because I think what makes UW great is the people of Wyoming, our innovation, our willingness to help our neighbors, those kinds of things. That's what makes people want to come to UW. And I would rather see the continual progress of transforming the university into something that's reflective of our state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Mr. Moline?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Since I don't appear much in front of this committee, and some of you I don't think you've had to sit and listen to me. When I'm down here representing my organization, it's based on my organization's policy. It's not my personal opinion, it's my organization's policy. And Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation has policy sitting in favor of this this bill that we have in front of us. There's arguments that it's political. Well, it's already political. It's, the hands are in one person that's been voted in by the people, but it's in the hands of one person. I realize that, it's confirmed by the Senate, but my members believe that having these elected by the people, by an area, to represent the views of the people is a great idea. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, sitting in favor of this legislation, I would take any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, I don't believe we have anybody online for this one, and looks like nobody else on the, oh, please come forward. Ms. Simmons, please go ahead.
Gail Simmons from Sheridan County. I am with Civics 307 and Y Vote on and against this. There are all 50 states, Mr. Chairman, all 50 states have at least one land grant university. And they are also present in the District of Columbia and 6 U.S. territories. There are actually a total of, I believe it's 112 land grant universities and colleges around the United States. Of those 112, there is one that has direct election of trustees, and that's Michigan State. None of the others do. And in Michigan State, they have 8 trustees. They have 2 that are elected every election cycle. So they go through that. So while I am absolutely a proponent of participation and elections, my concern is not that it is political, but that there is, other than disagreement with who the people have elected to be the chief executive of the state, who have issues with him politically, he appoints all kinds of boards. And there's certainly, other than a disagreement politically, there is certainly nothing that indicates that trying to have trustees run in a statewide election would be of benefit. So again, 1 out of 112, probably not a good idea, and I stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Strzok?
Thank you, Chairman. I guess my one question would be, why does it matter what other states do? How's that relevant for us?
Ms. Simmons.
Mr. Chair and Representative Strzok, did I say that right? Okay. It is, we never should be making decisions based solely on what other people do, or other states do, or what others do not do. However, I think it is a requirement of the legislature to consider how it works in other places, and does that apply to us? So I would never say, make that decision solely on that, but that preponderance of difference says a lot, and without delving into why the 111 others do not have an election and why they do, then making a decision without that kind of looking is warranted.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did your research show any state that did expand to some elected trustees and then decided it was a bad idea?
Ms. Simmons.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, yes, North Carolina State University did try it, and they are now where there is a board that is elected, and the board appoints trustees. So it is a second hand, if you will. But otherwise, I could not find any case where there had previously been elected, just Michigan State.
One follow-up.
Oh, follow-up?
So it could possibly just be a good idea that other people haven't caught on to yet.
Ms. Simmons.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, that is always in the realm of possibilities, but I wouldn't put money on it.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of that one university that does have elected board members, are you aware of any detrimental effects that we should be aware of?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, no, I do not. The question is whether this significant of a change is warranted there are a lot of bills that are being brought up to solve problems that don't exist. And when we solve problems that don't exist, we inevitably create problems. So no, in direct answer to your question.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment is closed. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Strzok and seconded by Representative Guggenmoss. Are there any amendments to the bill? No amendments. Is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Rodriguez Williams, would you like to come back and work the bill with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Rodriguez Williams, my reading of the bill is that this is proposing a nonpartisan election. It's a nonpartisan position to run for the Board of Trustees in the 7 districts. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Wyoming is very, very unique with our, limited population and just the way, the state is laid out. And I think with elected trustees coming from specific appointment districts, there might be a broader representation of our diverse regional perspectives on the board. So thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, in your opinion, what would it be better just to elect all the whole board? I mean, it seems like 14 is a lot, plus 5. I just like your perspective.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Williams, thank you for your question. So we run into some constitutional issues with that because we do have a constitutional obligation for that 12 members or 12 trustees, should I say. I would add that there's no fiscal note to this attached to the bill. I think that this is a step in the right direction. I'm not interested in bringing a constitutional amendment, just interested in more broader representation. And really, I think most people in Wyoming love the university. I think we all agree with that, right? But I don't think many folks can really even name who represents them on the Board of Trustees. And so, again, it's really an attempt to model what our community colleges are doing. And I don't think that the expansion would cause much heartburn from my community, at least, so, or have a fiscal impact. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 148. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 148, University of Wyoming Governance Elected Trustees do pass. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley?
Aye.
Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strzok?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
Aye.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
9 ayes.
All right, we have about 16 minutes left. Since we're only on second reading, I think we'll go ahead and use it and just see how far we can get. So House Bill, which one? 307, is on the table for our consideration. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be back. I am Ken Pendergraft, House District 29, and I will tell you that I deliberately held this bill back for some time until I could get the number 307. I thought it was cool.
Wish I would have thought of that.
Folks, I offer you House Bill 307, and this, of course, concerns poll watchers and polling station observation. We have not had a real uniform policy across the state. Various counties from the party, for example, have been a little bit reticent to actually recruit and properly place poll watchers where they could. And various counties have reacted in various ways to the poll watchers. And quite frankly, some of them have not been treated real well and have been allowed perhaps to be there, but not to be close enough to actually see what's going on. So the purpose of this bill is to expand the rights of the poll watchers and provide for the people of Wyoming the assurance that someone is indeed looking out for them and to have confidence in our election process. It's also to make it more consistent across the state on both sides. This bill, quite frankly, I've only had for a couple of days, and I may have to call in a friend at times, but I just wanted to share the gist of it. What this bill does is expand the poll watchers' availability to be at the poll before the voting opens, during the voting, to actually be adequately provided for to do their job as described while they are there. For example, one of the things you'll find in here is that they provided a chair. It's actually come up in some places where they said, yeah, you can watch, but you got to go stand over in the corner. That's inappropriate. To be close enough to be able to see exactly what is going on. And then after the poll closes, this expands it so that these poll watchers would have the ability to watch the rest of the process to indeed confirm that procedures are being properly followed, and just makes sense to me. One of my favorite US representatives is fond of saying sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I think that's exactly what this is. We've had some situations in the past in other counties where people have raised some questions, and rather than being entirely open about it, things were not forthcoming. And the end result was we created more of a problem for ourselves, and the rumor mill gets to fly in. If you got nothing to hide, you got nothing to hide. So I guess that's the principle behind this. I can walk through this briefly if you want. However, there are some folks back here from the Secretary of State's office who possibly would be able to do that a little bit more detail. I'm certainly glad to do that and answer any questions.
If that's what you'd like, we can go with the second option. Are there any questions for Mr. Pendergraft? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one of clarification. Page 4, we're looking down at line 10, 10, and 11. It says there may be one poll watcher for each political party. Are we saying each major political party, or having the Constitution Party, Green Party, Libertarian Party?
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kelly. I believe the term here, and perhaps there'd be another opinion in the second phase of this, but I believe the term here is to allow any party, whether major or minor. And certainly if that's not the case, I would try to amend it as same, but that would be my intention.
Further questions for the sponsor? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Pendergraft. You referenced some situations in the past where things were not forthcoming. Could you elaborate on those just a little bit?
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Williams. There was one example where in Park County, some citizens were kind of questioning the results. And they asked to be able to do a hand count. And this is a slightly different issue than what I'm talking about, but I think this particular incident illustrates my point better than some of the others. So they went and just asked, and the votes had already been counted, and it was agreed that whatever they did was not going to change the election. It had already been signed, sealed, and delivered. But they just wanted to confirm that things were done properly and in order, and that indeed the results that did come out were exactly what had happened. And there was a lot of foot dragging. There was a lot of back and forth as about whether or not you could actually see the ballots. Things went back and forth. So it went through the court system. There is a time limit on how long these ballots survive, and then at a certain prescribed time, the ballots are be destroyed. And the end of the story is just about the time when these people had arranged to be able to actually go through and do a sample hand count to validate the results. They went to go pick up the ballots, and the ballots had been destroyed prematurely. If you got nothing to hide, you got nothing to hide, you know? In fact, if you put it out there and it verifies exactly what was there, then you quell all of these rumors and all of these questions. And to me, it just makes sense to be as open and transparent as you possibly can. And any reluctance to do so causes more suspicion and more issues.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? Seeing none, is there any other legislators in the room who would like to testify? Is there anyone who drove all the way across the state to testify on this, just in case? No. All right. Can we hear from the state agency, please? We'll probably end with that and take public testimony beginning at our next meeting on Friday.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it is wonderful to be here at the Education Committee. Obviously, we don't get a lot of bills in front of you, but look forward to working with you, and I think it's great that we're out of our corporation's sort of comfort zone. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State, and to my right, the far right, is Jesse Naiman, our Chief Deputy, our Chief Counsel. I want to first start out and say I'm very in support of House Bill 307, Poll Watchers Polling Station Observation, which we have internally in our office termed the Poll Watcher Bill of Rights Bill. And what we're trying to do with this bill, poll watchers play a crucial role in ensuring election integrity by monitoring the voting process for fairness, transparency, and compliance with election laws. They help detect and report irregularities, prevent misconduct, and provide documentation in case of disputes. Their presence increases public trust in elections and is an important role of the respective political parties, which goes back to the early 1900s and even before. This bill increases the rights of poll watchers in various aspects and would like to highlight a number of ways that it does that. The principal thing this bill does, though, you think about the 8 or 9 different sort of things it's accomplishing. The number one thing is clarifying that poll watchers are able to observe the process after the closure of polls and during absentee counting, which right now there is not clarity on. And that is an area where, frankly, Wyoming is pretty weak. Most states do, especially in the prior instance, when polls close, are very clear that poll watchers can remain at the polling place. And our statute goes in the opposite direction and says that they must leave. And so this clarifies that poll watchers are allowed to observe all aspects of an election, including the opening of polling places, the closing of polling places, and the tabulation of ballots. The bill also clarifies the poll watchers have the right to observe the early in-person voting process. Now, then you go through the bill and there's a lot of just different instances where different situations have arisen. And I'm going to let the party, maybe the Republican Party is here to testify a little bit to the different situations they've encountered. But for example, subsection E, that they'll be provided chairs. Well, it's been an issue. People there all day, 12 hours plus, and they don't have a chair. And so I understand it's a little bit prescriptive, but that's where we're at in the year 2025. It has been an issue. So the way we address it in the Wyoming State Legislature is it goes in the books. And so that's what we're trying to see. That's what this bill is doing. On the badges, there's been issues with poll watchers being required to wear certain types of badges, and there's been sort of a dispute on it. So this allows badges in certain situations, provided it's not a special or customized badge. So we kind of compromised on this, but just providing a framework so we can minimize these disputes and move forward. We also did identify a small drafting error that we do believe needs to be fixed to provide clarity in the bill. Mr. Naaman, do you want to run through that? And I believe you have the 8 copies, or we did print out a version. We went ahead and printed out where we were hoping to take it. And with your indulgence, we'd like to hand that out. But Mr. Naaman could talk for a few moments,
All right,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
That'd be
Naaman.
great.
Mr. Chairman, before I get into it, should I just, give the copies of the amendment to staff first, or what would you guys prefer?
If you would like.
Certainly.
Okay.
I can proceed whenever you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, as this bill says, for example, on page 4, one of the major changes here is it says poll watchers may watch every aspect of the election and not just, as the Secretary and Representative Pendergraft mentioned, the portion where polls are open. In order to accomplish that, this bill has conforming changes to 2212-101 and 2214-102. It's kind of a cross-reference. So to make clear that Chapter 12 of the Election Code describes the details that happen when the polls open, and Chapter 14 describes what happens when polls close and the tabulation of the count. Currently on page 3, line 3, and page 3, line 18, these lines refer to the rights of poll watchers in 2215-109 will apply to the section thus referring to 2212-101 and 2214-102. I think what we want to clarify here is that the rights of poll watchers to apply to all aspects that happen in each chapter, both Chapter 12 when the polls open and Chapter 14 when the polls close and the count is tabulated. So this amendment would, if passed, would effectuate that change and make that conforming amendment so the bill is consistent.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could have a few more comments now.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to reiterate that I'm in support of this bill. The centerpiece of this bill is putting us in alignment with other states and allowing poll watchers to be able to observe all parts of the counting process, not just when polls are open, which we're pretty weak on. Most states do allow that. And then there's, it creates a procedure for replacement. That's another issue we've had, this chair issue. The stinking badge issue, that was a joke, the badge issue. And then, yeah.
We don't need no thinking.
Yeah, exactly. But, so there's 6 things in here, but the centerpiece of it is allowing that access to poll watching at all times. So, thank you. And I'm in support of this.
Are there questions for the Secretary of State, Representative Lawley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Secretary Gray. And to education, welcome to education.
Yes.
A couple things, and they kind of go together, so I'll just throw them out there and you can respond because I know time is short. What's the clerk's position on this? I can see some potential at some point where there's potential interruption or interference with the statutory duties of our clerks. And the pressure they feel right now, I know has been strong on other things where micromanaged, as words have been used, for example, but I'm not saying that doesn't mean if what's in here isn't appropriate necessarily, but I do think it's a fair and important inquiry also to understand where are those lines?
Yeah.
And so could you just address that?
Yeah.
For me?
Secretary Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Lawley. A very valid question. Like everything in policymaking and in life, I love that word balance. And, you know, we want to have that balance here. I can tell you that most states do have this alignment where poll watchers can observe all parts of the process. And I think, you know, if they have some sideboards that they want to talk about, I'm certainly open to that discussion. But I think having poll watching in the absentee process and after the polls have closed, not having that in Wyoming has decreased voter confidence. And I just don't think that is the balance we want to strike. So, you know, the centerpiece of this is really about trying to achieve that access at all times. And I think that is a really worthwhile goal. Certainly want to engage with them on some of their ideas to continue to improve the bill. But I think what we're trying to achieve here is truly balanced and I think is going to resolve a lot of concerns out there.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yes.
I have a question for you, because we are delegating authority to your office here to make rules. So as long as I have your ear, are there any particular rules you have in mind outside the scope of what's already written here?
Secretary Gray.
Mr. Chairman, not at this time. I think, you know, per Representative Lawley's comments, you know, as things come up, I think there's some areas around the edges that we could do some work. Frankly, I think the rulemaking authority is already there in the statute, but making it explicit within another bill, I'm always for. We've had some issues with that, which frankly other agencies don't seem to run into, but we have. So I think it's always good. So, but I don't have anything in mind. I think as things come up, I do think this is one of those things like with the badge issue. I like just putting it in the statute because it's come up, but that's the sort of thing that I could see similar things coming up that rather than going into session, maybe we could write a rule on it to at least resolve it for an election cycle or two. So we don't have to have a bill every single time on smaller things. But remember, you know, I have the same rulemaking process of every single agency. It goes through the Management Council and the governor must sign those rules. They do not go into effect without the governor's signature. And he can't even pocket veto them, unlike bills. He has to sign them or they don't go into effect.
Thank you. Would the committee be willing to ask further questions to the secretary offline? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned. We will continue public testimony next meeting. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Ms. Phillips.